Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GLORIO Chat, the best anime podcast on the internet. I know we have a lot of new anime to talk about, but I'm kind of thinking of just scrapping that all and talking about the Macross news from this past week. I don't know what you
Die, Harmony Gold.
I won't believe it until I'm holding a disc in my hand.
Yeah, there's still, if anybody didn't hear, they've apparently sorted out the legal hell that has been Macross for the past 30 to 40 years, but like we're saying, we'll believe that when we see it.
I mean, we and the rest of the internet already started micro-analyzing every little scrap of news that came out.
How could we not? Like, when the announcement is as vague as it was, how could we not overanalyze every word?
I mean, Zig, you were the one pulling up the Twitter banner of their new account or whatever.
We'll see where that goes, shall we?
Yeah. Anyway, that aside, we have a brand new anime season to talk about.
We sure do.
Spring 2021. Most of the shows are out. There's still a few stragglers that we'll cover later, but we have plenty to talk about today. It's been a pretty wild start, I think. There's been some surprises.
There's like 10 shows on Saturday.
I feel like the way I summarized this season to Eero the other day is I feel like this is the season of first episodes that make you go, huh, okay, I'll watch a few more episodes of that.
And then by mid-season, we will probably have like 3 shows left.
Oh yeah, of course, right. Like,
I mean, that's always how it works, right?
This is not to imply, well, I guess
that's kind of how it was last season too. I think.
Yeah. Like
I feel like we have even more interesting first episodes this season, though.
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. Is I wouldn't call all the shows that we're about to talk about winners, but they are certainly, some of them are interesting.
Yeah, and some of them are flat out bad, but we have to take the good with the bad sometimes.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always willing to go to bat for something which is like flawed but interesting rather than boring but safe, you know. So I'm quite intrigued by some of the stuff we've got.
All right. So before we dive into it, let's just introduce everybody. I'm Jel. I'm joined by Iro.
I'm still here. Not dead yet.
Still with us. I'm joined by G.
I want to make it clear in case somebody gets it twisted. We are an anti-Frank Agrima podcast. Need to make that as blatant as possible.
Who is that?
That is the CEO of Harmony Gold.
Oh, right.
Yeah, fuck
yes.
that guy.
I mean, yes. Right. We've been anti him since 1985.
We've been calling you out, Frank. Yes, since 1985.
So with us today, taking a break from his From Software marathon, we have Zig.
Is it really a marathon if it's just one game?
Also, a game that you said you totally weren't going to replay, and then immediately started replaying.
Well,
didn't you start Dark Souls?
Yeah, but it sucks.
Well, whether it sucks or not, you were playing it, so
Just
we'll
play
see.
Sekiro, Christ.
All right.
Anyway,
we'll
point
talk about
is,
Bloodborne another day, but
also,
we have a lot of anime to cover.
Yeah, I just want to use my introduction spiel to say I'm disappointed I was not here to defend Wonder Egg Priorities on our last week and last episode, and that's something we'll return to in the future, I think.
Yes, whenever they get
Once Wonder Egg Party gathers enough honor points with its next episode.
When is the it's supposed to do its final bit in June, right?
I think.
We may have 30th. We may have set aside a special episode for that or something.
We'll see.
I would say, Zig, now you should have cut a promo. You should have pointed at the WrestleMania sign and said, like, at WrestleMania, I'm gonna defend the good honor of Wonder Egg Priority.
Is that going to be the title card match? Me versus Zig, Wonder Egg Priority.
I don't know. Like, is that really a heated enough feud? Like somebody who's sort of into it versus somebody who's sort of not
as we
into
politely
it?
disagree on some minor points of the show.
No,
yeah, exactly.
We need the drama. We need. Where's the
Well,
heat?
you said X, but I actually disagree, and I think that X is very effective under the circumstances.
Yes, and I think it's 10% less effective. Yeah. Anyway,
Truly main event material.
yeah. Let's again, we'll shelve that conversation for another day as well, and let's talk new anime, or I guess in some cases returning anime, as we usually kick things off. So let's start with our usual warm-up. My Hero Academia.
Yeah.
Always,
You guys have anything interesting to say
The
on
most
this?
known of known quantities.
Always the opening card.
You know what?
My
Yes.
Hero Academia.
I have something to say about My Hero Academia. We're 5 seasons in and we still don't have a good opening.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
What the hell? Like, Jujutsu Kaisen had went 2 for 2 on openings and at least 1 for 2 on endings. And like that show is less than a year old. How the fuck has My Hero Academia been around since like what 2013 or something?
Something like that.
And like
yeah.
it had one okay opening, and that was the like Overworld one where All Might goes like fucking super ham. But
I didn't hate the very original one. It was fine. Like,
it's just like
It was
you're
fine.
right, Zig, but it's just like when you compare it to like, you know, your Naruto's and Bleaches, which have like a dozen good OPs to their name, it's
yeah, I guess, but also those ran much longer, right?
fair enough. But
So what
I
you're
don't know.
saying? What you're
By
saying
the time you hit
is,
season 5, you should probably have
what
at
you're
least one good OP.
what you're saying,
Yes.
Zig, is that if My Hero Academia had a like, let's say, 50 episode filler arc, that would have some good openings.
Yeah, sure,
That would have been totally worth it.
sure. Why
right?
not?
well,
Anyway, as far as the content of the show, do you guys have anything noteworthy other than it's more My Hero Academia?
dude, it's My Hero Academia. Like,
Yep.
you know what to expect at this point. Like, Deku want to be the very best. Bakugo's a dick. Everybody else is irrelevant.
Yep.
It's that show.
People will keep loving Bakugo for no seeming reason at all.
Yep.
Right?
He
Yeah.
gets don't worry. Everybody's favorite gets plenty of screen time this season.
I mean,
That
I feel like
sounds-
we're being very harsh. It's good. Like, I enjoy it, but
On
you
the
know,
other
there is
hand, Bakugo really does suck.
yes, he absolutely
And,
does.
Yeah, like that's the thing, right? Like we're not here to like shit on My Hero Academia. It's not a bad anime. Is it a worse anime than its first 2 seasons? Maybe, but like all in all, it continues to be a competent adaptation of the hit Weekly Shonen Jump manga.
Right.
And that's kind of all there is to say, right? Like unless you want to start like summarizing the plot, because otherwise, like there's not really.
The law of diminishing returns kicks in at some
Yeah,
point.
like-
You know, it's no longer fresh and new, and that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it's very much settled in
Yeah.
its lane
Right.
at this point.
Like it's actually like the one that I will bring up because it's so striking in comparison is that the current arc is that the main hero Deku's class is 1A and there's another class which is 1B, right? They're the same grade but different classes, you know, the typical
Yep.
like classroom situation, right?
And there's a class who has not been wrapped up in all this crazy shit.
Right, they've kind of been doing their own thing, just like being regular students, and now they're having a class 1A versus 1B like exercise, right?
Oh, tournament arc.
Tournament arc, right? And it's like some of the 1B kids are actually legitimately pretty cool. Like they have fun powers that like
Yeah.
get pushed into the 1B class because like they're not main character material. So they kind of take on more of a JoJo stand-esque like quality to them. Like they are weirder powers just like by their very nature.
Right.
And that's kind of
Right.
fun. But it's like after coming off the fucking like amazing tournament arc that was Jujutsu Kaisen's, like
Yeah.
where like you know a girl's power is gun and another girl's power is I can catch bullets with my bare hands,
Another dude's
and
power is
another
boogie
dude's
woogie.
is boogie woogie. Like it's just this is just not nearly as like it's just coming off of something that hot. Like this is just not nearly as exciting.
I've found my Jujutsu Kaisen marathon has ruined my enjoyment of all action sequences lately.
Yeah, fair
Sucker
enough.
Park is.
So we'll talk about that on some other shows later. But man,
Yeah.
it's like every action sequence I've seen this season has been like, man, but what if Sung-Ho Park directed this?
Right, like, what if he drifted a little bit more? Like, I had to go back and rewatch those fights with Jujutsu Kaisen, and you realize, wait, Yuji is drifting. Like, that's what he's doing
Yes,
in
he
this
did, yes,
fight.
now that you mention
he
it,
is
there's
drifting.
Look,
It's
the man
it's like-
introduced himself to the world by having horses drift on
right,
a run.
like, it's
Like-
the Sung-Ho Park classic, right? Because I was about to say, the only thing Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't have is drifting. I was like, wait, no, it totally does! He, like,
All right. Well, I got to rein this in because we can't make this about.
Yeah, that's
Jujutsu
all we.
Kaisen again,
It's
but
telling that this is what we're talking about when talking about My Hero Academia.
That's kind of the hot new thing now, and My Hero Academia is kind of the old. I don't want to say old news, but it's the old standby, right? Like.
What if Sung-Hoo Park directed the next Fast and Furious film?
Oh man, don't even get me started.
Okay, I'm done.
Fast and Furious, the animation.
Right.
I mean, those films are basically cartoons anyway at this point.
Yes, I think you could apply many of the same directing principles to those movies, and it would be great. All right, so let's move along to Megalo Box.
Yeah,
Megalo Box 2 NOMAD.
NOMAD.
This is the sequel to Megalo Box that we did not expect, and it's set 7 years in the future. Is that correct?
Yep.
And they've got Joe back in the game somehow. And is he?
For like Joe in the gutter.
Yeah,
Okay.
if the game is who could pick the most drugs off of the ground of a dirty bathroom,
Oh,
then
okay.
yes, Joe is winning very hard.
Okay, so they've started. Okay, so they've started him off at rock bottom, right?
So you're telling me
yeah.
it's a traditional boxing story then?
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Oh yeah, we watched episode 2 this morning, and
It was a very good episode, but it was very good in the ways that me and Iro love, where it's like we call a thing about 10 seconds before it happens.
Yeah, I mean that was the whole first season of Megalo Box, right?
But it's just executed with such so that's the thing, right? It's Megalo Box. It's it is the spiritual successor to Ashita no Joe, the classic legendary boxing manga. It is a sequel, right? Joe is clearly... It's been 7 years since his big win in the first anime, and he has clearly fallen on hard times, and like Megalo Box the first, I think that what NOMAD does very well is it continues to execute extremely strongly on its vision of what its story is. And that story is not necessarily
complex
that
in any way.
Or complex, but it is very well done, and I would actually say... tonally, it does seem to be making a point of distinguishing itself from its predecessor.
How so? Because, when I think of Megalo Box 1, you're right, I don't necessarily think of its incredible plot, I think of its ambience, of its aesthetic, all that kind of stuff. How have they changed that up?
So that part is definitely, that's still the same old Megalo Box, right? Great sense of setting, right? Gritty, grimy, backgrounds. You can feel the dust in the air. That part of Megalo Box is still the same old. I think the thing that's really kind of sticking out to me is kind of there's a very, real, there's a very real, grim melancholy to the show. And admittedly, we are still in the parts of the story that are Joe at his lowest before he pulls himself back up. But I think that what's working for me is that they are exploring some interesting subplots that I think are interesting specifically in the ways that they are in conversation with the original Ashita no Joe. And the main, I think the main theme that is coming up in this season right now, at least for now, is kind of how much is pride actually worth? And the reason for that is that Joe sort of meets a new rival character who goes by Chief. And Chief is this really big gentle giant of a man, very amicable. He plays the guitar, he hangs out with the kids, he jokes
with the old ladies.
Yeah, he dances with old ladies at festivals, a real nice guy, right? But
so he's the villain is what you're saying.
Well, he is a Megalo Boxer, like Joe. And Joe's whole thing, so the thing I want to bring up is despite how far Joe has fallen, the one thing that has not changed is he won't do rigged fights. Even now, even though he's addicted to drugs and drinking his life away and drifting from one arena to the next, the one thing he always makes clear, he only fights fair, right? He doesn't throw fights, he doesn't do any of that insider betting stuff that goes on. Chief, on the other hand, does all of that shit. He throws fights all the time, right? He is happy to play the punching bag for a paycheck. And at first it's like, okay, so they're setting up these dudes as contrasts, right? Like, I think it pays off pretty well in the second episode, where it's revealed that in the years since the original Megalo Box, there has been some sort of refugee crisis, and that there's been a huge influx of Latin American coded immigrants to wherever Megalo Box world is. Like, it's never really made clear where it takes place in.
I mean, I assume this is a very obvious and deliberate parallel to real life sentiments, let's say.
Yes, because turns out Chief boxes because he is a part of that immigrant community. And this immigrant community, like many immigrant communities, is very strongly disliked by the native population. They kind of start getting into this in episode 2. You know, a lot of like, you know, go back to where you came from and all that stuff, right? And it turns out that Chief's rationale for the way he fights is that this is how he survives in this world, right? Like, as an immigrant, as like a dude who has nothing to his name but his huge body and powerful fists, like, this is how he can survive, and this is how he can support like his community.
You got to put food on the table, right?
Exactly, and like,
it
kind of sets up this.
What is your pride of punching your way to top Megalonia worth when you don't even have a home? Like...
Exactly, and it kind of begins to immediately set up a really interesting dynamic between these two characters. And again, it's hard to tell like, you know, what's the payoff on this all going to be, but for now, I think Megalobox 2, Nomad, is doing a pretty damn good job, at least, you know, for what I want out of the story, to set up some interesting plot threads.
I think that is a really interesting angle to take, because obviously, I think one of the great strengths of the original Megalo Box was, you know, Joe's emphasis on fighting fair when he's surrounded by all these, you know, corrupt backhanders and everything like that. So to kind of spin that and make that the question, you know, like what is your honor actually worth, you know, back here in the real world? I think that's a really clever play to take that character in direction.
Like how Zig just jumped to the conclusion that he was the villain. I mean, I was thinking the same thing, the way you got, because that's how that character is usually portrayed, right? But then when you make it like, we
also only have 2 episodes in, but,
right. So I mean, you know, given, you know, that it's so early, they could easily, you know, make it so he's actually like, you know, stealing from kids or something later, right? But as of right now, anyway, it's at least, you know, makes you question: is he the bad guy? Like that kind of thing. You know, is it so wrong for him to be doing what he's doing when, like, you know, there's this much positive impact, I guess. Yeah,
and this is not to say that this is not still Megalobox, because spoilers, Chief is fighting because he literally has to save the rec center from getting demolished by an evil land magnet.
Really,
so, like,
subtle, right?
You know, it's still Megalobox.
but still, the concept, right?
But yeah, it's just it's really
different.
well done. Yeah, like it's just,
I think it will be.
Sorry.
Oh no, go on, G. Go on.
No, you can go.
I was just going to say, I think how much they challenge the prevailing idea of, you know, Joe being the moral, upstanding character at the center of the story will be the most interesting part there. You know, like, will he compromise his principles to help people? You know, will he, or like, will it be a study in contrast between him and Chief or whoever, whatever other characters they choose to, you know, put into the narrative there.
Yeah. The one last thing I will say before we move on, and this is like the other interesting wrinkle that I talked about this with Iro. We don't know how long this will stick, because like at the end of the day, this is a boxing anime.
Yeah.
But at the end of episode 2, the thing that actually changes is that Joe agrees to coach Chief. Joe becomes a coach rather than a boxer. And that's actually the thing that's like, okay, because like one of the biggest like connections in the original season, the first anime, was Joe's relationship with Nanbu, right? His eye-patched coach guy.
Coach / mentor / partner in crime.
Yeah,
all of these things.
Nanbu wasn't perfect, but he cut his own eye out for Joe in the end. So like, you know, it's easy to forgive a lot of that in the end. But yeah, so the idea of like Joe becoming a coach in of himself, right? It's like, you know, Ira and I are kind of already like speculating, is this going to be like how Joe, like, you know, walks a day in Nanbu's shoes and realizes,
right? Because he is like, over these episodes, almost practically haunted by Nambu's ghost.
Yes.
Like, almost literally.
I mean,
seeing him, off the side and stuff.
I mean, when he becomes Chief's coach, is there any sort of understanding that Chief will stop throwing matches, or is that yet to be resolved?
Chief intends to enter the big tournament in the city
Aha.
to get enough money for the to save the migrant
Yep.
camp.
Yeah.
But of course, like, that also brings up how in season 1, once Joe got far enough in Megalonia, like, they tried to get him to throw
Yes.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it does bring up that implicit question of,
Right.
even with Joe as a coach, how far up is Chief willing to go before the,
Selling out.
yeah.
Yeah, and like, there's also still a tension of like, Joe dramatically throws his pills away at the end of episode 2, but like, he is still an addict and he is still going through
Yeah,
withdrawals.
it's not
So,
quite that
like,
easy, I'm afraid.
Yeah, there's a. I just think that, like, it's easy to, like, just like list all these things out. It's very like standard gritty, underdog story rise back to the top. But like, it's just the way Megalo Box executes on all of this. It's just so well done that I still get like completely sold on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, making, like I said, I think making a moral quandary the heart of the story this time round is a good build on those themes from the first series, and it will be interesting to see, how far Joe's code will bend or break based on that,
Right.
Like,
And
will
now
he
there's-
compromise? He only compromises in the unlimited boxing works route.
And now
All right.
there's lots of lovely acoustic guitar and
Hell yeah.
the music, and all of the episode titles are in Spanish.
Oh yeah, they're all in Spanish now.
Is there any
that's an easy
theming,
tell,
like
actually.
the way the first season had like death in every title? Can you tell if there's any
Not
theming?
yet. I don't think so.
Yeah, it's only 2 episodes, right?
Sure. Yeah.
They all seem
But-
to kind of be leaning more into like, I don't know, would you call it like more morally gray sentiments, right? Like, what was the name of episode 2? It was like something about cowards and
let's see here.
yeah, I'm
Episode
sorry
1.
to spring that on you.
Yeah,
You're the one who looked them up, so
It's true. I did look them up. Episode 1 was The Ghosts Hum a Requiem, and episode 2 was A Despair Gives Courage to Cowards.
right, that's what it was.
Right.
So
All right.
not quite the same like obvious theme yet, but we may find out over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really got to move on here. So
I know.
we'll have plenty of time to talk about that throughout the season, I'm sure. But
Indeed.
let's move on to our other big known
The other big
quantity
sequel.
this season. SSSS.Dynazenon.
Scarred souls shine like stars.
God, that's so good.
Dynazenon.
Is it
So
though?
good.
Is it?
Yes, it's so good.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
So can I start on this one?
Okay.
Well, hang on one second. So, again, reminder: this is the sequel to SSSS Gridman, from however many years ago that was.
2018.
2018.
Yeah, this is at least so far not directly connected to that in any way. It's new cast, new setting, and everything so far.
New premise, basically.
Yeah, so where it's kind of a fresh start, but kind of same mood, I guess.
Yeah.
But Zig, if you want to go ahead.
I mean, on that note, I think the thing which surprised me about this was how much they have pushed that mood aspect of it, and how this show is like straight out of the gate. It's even like more weirder and disconcerting and disconnected than Gridman occasionally was, because I think one of the things Gridman did was, through its storytelling and its visual style and everything, it emphasized a sense of detachment and isolation a lot. And Dynazenon, they've almost gone full art house on this. There's like hard cuts, there's weird camera angles, long, awkward held shots. It feels like that they went even harder on that aspect of it.
Like I always say, it's the spirit of old Gynax.
Yep.
I mean, very
Yeah,
much so.
Like, I mean, I think it's like, I talk about it a lot, but it's like, I think the thing Trigger actually maybe inherited from Gynax, that Gynax also were like the undisputed masters of, was like timing. Like, it is the only studio I feel like I ever mention it, but like just their sense of pacing and the way they time their shots, like the way they time their animations, it I feel like there are very few studios who do it that way.
Right, but I think before Gridman, that was mostly in the sense of either setting up incredible action sequences or setting up jokes.
Right,
you know?
but I guess what I mean is that they had that, like,
Right.
they had that skill set all.
Right.
Right,
When I
absolutely.
when I say old guy next, I mean this feels almost more like Anno or Tsurumaki era
Right, totally.
type of
Because I mean, it's
guy
like, the things,
next
like,
directing.
even something as goofy as like Fooly Cooley had tons of those kind of shots.
Oh, yeah, like-
Right.
Lovely lingering shots.
Fooly Cooley
like,
is a very sad show on some level.
And it has
Oh,
a lot. There's a lot of slow, quiet
yeah
bits
like
in
they've-
Fooly Cooley. Like
they've always been very good at that kind of stuff.
This is
Yeah.
one cut in episode 2 of Dynazenon that stood out to me as this, where like we have the dumb gag of Gauma enters the bathroom and
Yes.
gets in the
Yes.
in the tub, and they're arguing about this, and like mid sentence it cuts to Minami in her bathtub, and like the sentence being said is the same or whatever, like in the background of like her
Yeah.
room, and you're like, wait, what's going on for a second, and then you go, oh, her parents are arguing in the other
Yeah.
room,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Yeah.
and then we cut back to
I'd also like to
the-
point out in that sequence as well that the exquisite timing of Galma stepping down off the step and the bubble coming out of the tap to continue to hide his junk is
it's
terrific.
Yeah, that's
it's you know they're
Yeah.
doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
Of course, they're doing
Yeah.
the classic like Ava gag.
so. So I guess some of the differences here. I mean, we mentioned Galma, who appears to be an adult and is part of the team, which is a bit different. And also, it takes like 4 different people to pilot Dynazenon,
Right.
Yeah.
versus the one chosen kid piloting Gridman or whatever, which makes the dynamic a little bit different, and they can kind of interchange parts and everything.
I think
but-
that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, go ahead, G.
I was gonna say, I think the thing that's really sticking to me with Dynazenon so far is like, I totally agree with what you said, Zig. But I think that the thing that for me is like really working is actually in the ways that like Dynazenon is already slowly starting to kind of strike out on its own in like some very key ways in its presentation and also its characterization. Like, I think that Dynazenon is definitely like going a little bit more, even more art house in some ways, but I think it's also like there are some noticeable details that I think are like intentionally different, right? Like we don't have ominous kaiju looming in the distance in Dynazenon, right? Like
I mean, episode 2 explicitly shows that there is no reset this time.
Exactly, right.
There are consequences,
Exactly.
and that's a
Like,
huge shift.
definitely, and I think that even like the character dynamics themselves actually kind of surprised me, right? Like Yume get in episode 1 very much gets, she is clearly being set up as like sort of the like Rika adjacent character, but then I think they do something very smart in episode 2 where like that scene where like Yume takes Yomogi to like the aftermath of like their fight, like she's like, follow me, I want to take you somewhere, right? And like shows him the like consequences of their actions. Like it actually speaks volumes in like some small ways into how actually, even if she won't like
she's unable to say like this is why we need to fight or whatever, but
right, but it's very clear that's her intention, right? Like she's actually very like, I think at least starting out, I think the assumption was going to be, oh, is Yume going to be the reluctant one? But she's actually like fairly invested in this like Dynazenon setup, and Yomogi is the one who needs to be dragged into it. And
I
think
feel
that
like there's something about his incessant need to work. Like they're seeding something there.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I
implication
think-
in episode 1 is like he just wants to avoid being home as much as possible.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's kind of a thematic thing they're going for with like, what's more important in your life, your dumb, part-time job at the convenience store, or actually helping people or something. Which
piloting this sick robot.
right,
Right,
Um,
but that, you know what I mean? I don't think that I think a lot of the surface appearance of this show is going to fall away as we go along. I think that, so for example, with Yomogi, like, I think the easy storytelling assumption would be, well, like, he hates his home, he hates his home life, he wants to become independent, he's working to earn money and stuff. But we see his mum and his grandma, and, like, they seem perfectly fine. You know, it's not like he's from a broken home or anything. You know, so what's the angle there? You know, they've already
that's the thing.
they've already successfully avoided the obvious cliche there.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is definitely the thing I'm definitely looking forward to, right? Like, you know, on the flip side, like, I'm really interested in seeing, like, with Yume, like, I feel like they're already beginning to start to set up, like, does her Messiah complex is probably the wrong word, right? But is her actual, like, surprising willingness to completely engage with this strange man and his robot toys, because, like, how is that related to her sister, right? They're very much clearly setting up that link there, and I think that because of that, right? And, like, you know, we haven't even gotten to, like, the other two characters, right? The NEAT, whose name I keep forgetting, and his cousin, right? Like,
I'm really interested in what her deal is,
right? Because she explicitly doesn't.
She doesn't
There's
get
a great
toy.
shot where God was handing out the toys.
She doesn't get one.
Yeah.
Okay, so
there's the OP, which I don't want to look too deeply into, but the OP has a lot of stuff going on in it, and it's like.
Oh, the OP has misled us before.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But
well, the thing I will point out, I'm not sure if you guys remember this detail from Gridman, but the thing she picks up is one of the, like, pearls that Akane used in season 1 to make the kaiju.
Right.
So, like, there's.
I said this on the preview episode, but I think this will be one of those cases where, you know, initially we only have a very, very loose connection to Gridman, and I think as time goes by and we peel back the layers, you know, we will see some more explicit links.
Yeah, I mean, just like the first series, there were a lot of mysteries that got unraveled. I'm sure that'll be the case here. I was going to throw out with the cousin character not getting to be part of Dynazenon. What are the odds that Gamma is dead by episode 6 and she has to take over?
I think there's a fairly solid chance that happens. He's not in the ending.
I'm curious how it goes, because I think the way Gamma is framed in this show, it's like he is like he is the X factor that has us going like, okay, so how is this dude connected to Gridman, right? Like, what is
right? He's like, somebody entrusted me with the Dino Dragon,
right?
But
like his
also
connection with the amazingly named kaiju eugenicists, the villains, the seemingly villains of this show, right?
But also in sort of on a meta level as well, he doesn't fit into this story. You know, he is a very he is a very, you know, he is the cliche Trigger / Gainax hero. You know, he's the big dumb guy who means well and is everybody's favourite, you know, and that's great, and that character archetype still works fine. You know, you look at Promare, but he seems so out of place in this much more introspective universe.
Yeah. But for me, that's kind of why I think it's interesting, right? Like, I want to see how a character like that interacts with a universe that is clearly much more, like, introspective. And
I think it's a deliberate creative choice, definitely.
Right, definitely. And the thing I don't know if I can call this a spoiler, because this is information from the original Tokusatsu Gridman show, but, like, someone on Twitter like noticed this, and it became more apparent with the reveal of the OP. Apparently, there's a mummy who comes back to life in the original Gridman.
Oh yeah, okay.
And you look at Gamba's design, and he's like covered in bandages, and it's like, what's going on here?
I think, you know, I think that
and specifically that mummy has a medallion that is medallion that is shown in the OP.
So they get that's how they get the like Dino Dragon in the original Gridman, is like they revive a dinosaur or something, and it turns to,
you know, the normal stuff.
And so it's like, okay, that's not to say this links up 1-to-1. Of course, the show is free to do any kind of like swerve or red herring with that stuff, but it does have me going like, all right, well, what are you doing here, Dynazenon?
I mean, I think Gridman, it ties back to Gridman the Hyper Agent, the Tokusatsu show. They were more thematic and stylistic than necessarily, you know, a minute, you know...
Oh, definitely.
Like, lore connection, you know. I mean, technically, SSSS Gridman is a sequel to the Tokusatsu show, but like you don't really need to have known anything about it. It's more,
Right.
like I said, a thematic thing.
Right. And that's kind of the case here as well, where I have a feeling if you didn't watch the Gridman anime, it probably wouldn't have mattered much either, but
Right.
at least so far.
Well,
we'll
so
see.
far, I do think that if you haven't watched SSSS Gridman yet, I would highly.
Yeah, I mean, you
recommend
should
it.
watch it. Yes.
It's good.
Right. One more thing, and then we really need to move on. My favorite little detail was when they're like replaying the first fight from Yomogi's
so good.
perspective. You guys know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, yeah.
It kind of implies that they actually hear the OP music
Yes.
in universe.
It's diegetic sound.
God.
So like you can actually hear it playing outside, like it's
Right,
actually
you
happening.
hear the muffling of it when they're inside the mech.
Yeah,
it's so good.
So that was my personal favorite detail. But
Yeah, my personal favorite detail, I'll bring it real quick, is I find it very funny that Gamma handed out the toys.
yes,
And Gamma's such a great guy. He didn't even keep the dragon for himself. He gave it to Yomogi, his new friend.
Right.
You know, like Gamma kept the shitty legs for himself. Like, that's how you know he's a good friend. Is he gives
Yes.
the best parts to his friends first.
yeah. All right. Well, that show's pretty good, and definitely looking forward to more on that.
Yeah.
But we have a lot more anime to talk about, and
no.
we're already 36 minutes into this podcast.
Yep.
So,
I'll leave this one to you guys.
let's get
my
to
God.
the new shows. I've lumped a couple of together because they're somewhat similar in some ways. So the first two shows I would describe as alternate history fantasy pre-war Japan shows that probably could have stood to have higher production values. The first being Joran, the Princess of Snow and Blood.
Yep.
This was a show about well, I don't know if I only watched the first episode,
Yeah,
but
me too.
it's kind of a revenge story thing a bit.
It seems to be going for a lot of different things at the same time.
Or
That's
like
the general direction with
there's
the
some
main
kind
character,
of,
I guess.
like
But
spy squad who are after monsters, and the main character seems to be like part monster, so she could fight them
right,
with her magical girl transformation.
yeah, I don't know if she's supposed to be like based on the Yuki Onna or something like that, but yeah, she has part monster powers or something.
I do really like the thick line brush effect when she powers up, and also the how the aura passes over her face and you see through to the skull underneath.
Right.
Effect, and then they start fighting, and I go, man, what if Sung Hoo Park directed this?
Yes, exactly.
We cannot keep using that. Like,
Okay, then fine. Let's use the other obvious comparison. What if the people who made Sirius the Jaeger worked on this?
Yeah,
it does
no,
seem to lack a certain spark.
Yeah,
Vivy.
first of all, I was surprised how action heavy it actually was. Like,
Yeah.
there's, I mean, we had the lady pulling out her crossbow umbrella thing, which was
Yeah.
pretty.
That was
cool.
pretty good.
And the other guy had like a heat sword thing, and
Yeah.
like stuff I was not expecting from the show.
I think that is stuff
they-
you front load, though, right? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and like all that was cool, but like you said, Ziggy, it felt like it was lacking a bit of spark. Like, I don't know if it was just like
and
the
like,
animation itself was like, it was fine.
yeah, I don't think it
but
looks terrible. Like, I think
it felt like it needed some extra oomph to it, I guess.
yeah, there's just, I don't know. It's not quite smart enough to be like a political come espionage thriller, and it's not quite dumb enough to be a pure action show.
Right.
And there are encouraging signs of both ends of that dichotomy, but yeah, it's just missing that je ne sais quoi. It's a little hard to put my finger on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool when the lady was shooting arrows out of her parasol and then
Yes.
blocking bullets with it and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty solid, but it was just like needs something to put it over the edge.
Yeah,
for
I plan to give it a few more episodes. I should really catch up and watch that second episode.
Yeah,
What
once
about the
we
other
get,
show here you have listed?
yeah.
Say
So the other one
bullet point.
we'll mention Mars Red. I don't know if any of you all watched it. but,
Unfortunately not.
Nope.
This ended up being more of like so it's about, again, it's set pre-war, like 20s 30s Japan, and this guy is like part of some secret military division that monitors the activity of vampires that have appeared in Japan and either takes them in and tries to have them join the force, or if they refuse to join or can't be controlled, then he kills them. So it kicks off with him picking up this this lady who was like an actress, and then she just like freaked out and killed a bunch of people, and she turned out to be a vampire, and she's like super mysterious, and it's kind of going for this like vampire romance thing type of thing. This was much more of like well, first of all, let me note this is very strange because this is an adaptation of a stage play. Apparently.
Okay.
It's very it's very theatrical.
It happens occasionally, but yeah, it's weird.
And again, I liked what they were going for with the presentation. It was very like artsy and theatrical, but they just did not have the technical ability, resources to pull it off to the degree I think that they wanted to. But I feel like their heart was in the right place, and it was actually pretty interesting. Like I do like that kind of stuff. So it was actually kind of interesting in that regard, but I don't know if they're going to be, I don't know. It was it was a little rough to watch from the technical point of view on it. But in the end, I think she doesn't actually turn into a vampire, but it gets close. But I think that's going to be kind of what they're going for. Some sort of vampire romance type thing. The other fun point I'll just throw out there, they actually had the dub ready for the first episode. And they had some pretty fantastic, and I'm making air quotes with my hands, very fantastic accents in this episode.
Oh, boy.
They had one character with a
hell yeah,
chimney sweep British accent.
Oh, good.
And then another character was like 1930s New York newsboy.
Did they go full Dick Van Dyke on it?
It was pretty close, but the other one, the New York one, was a girl, and she was like, "Hey, Mister, can you let me into the theater?" I'm like, "Oh God, here we go."
Oh boy,
it was pretty great.
I'm walking here.
Yeah, and I, once again, I'm from New York, and I can't do that accent, but even so, that was fun. But yeah, it was a pretty neat show. I might give it another episode, but I don't know. I just don't think they have the chops to execute what they're going for, but I appreciate their ambition with it. All right, let's move on to my other things I've lumped together. These, like I said, we got to take the good with the bad sometimes. And I wanted to mention the 2 shows about adult salarymen romancing high school girls.
So this is the good, clearly.
Not both these shows were bad. I was surprised.
The dichotomy here is: would you like your grooming aggressive and quote unquote comedic, or subtle and insidious?
Oh, well, here's the thing. I don't think the first one was even grooming. He's just outright like, I want
hitting on her.
Yeah, well,
yes.
I mean, let's use a blanket term, shall we?
Right. Yeah, let's just name the shows first.
Yeah.
The first one is KOIKIMO. I'm not going to go look up what the full title is. That's the abbreviated title that everyone's calling it. I think even on the streaming site, I forget if it's on Crunchyroll or where it is, just has KOIKIMO. They don't have the full title.
Right.
So this one, again, these are both about adult salarymen romancing high school girls.
This one, like, the guy knows this high school girl's sister or something, and so they meet, and he tries to hit on her.
He's her best friend's older brother, isn't it?
Right.
That's it. And she's like, he tries to hit on her, and she's like, gross. This weird adults try to hit on me. And then he's like, that's so hot.
Right, because he's like this super hot womanizer guy, and no woman ever says no to him, so that when she says no to him, he gets off on that, basically.
The thrill of the chase.
Which only encourages him to continue to pursue her, despite her continuing to say, "Get away from me, you creep."
Yeah, but she's occasionally won over by the charming, earnestness of his attempts, as is necessary for any story this icky to work.
Right. So that's all as bad as it sounds. And as Zig was saying with the other show, HIGEHIRO, again, I can't be asked to look up the whole title. it's a little more insidious, because the concept with this one is this guy, runs into this girl in the middle of the night who has apparently been selling her. She's a runaway, and she's been selling herself to get by, basically, and she tries to, seduce him, and he's not having any of it because he's not into, children. But
Except
he can't.
He is. Where are you going here?
but he can't. He can't just leave her out there. So she asks if she can just stay with him anyway, and he agrees to just let her stay. Basically, it ends up with him agreeing to let her stay with him until she can get like a real job and get on her feet. And that in itself is weird, but probably not awful. But
there is a way you can play that story to play up the weirdness as part of the wrongness of the premise, and then pivot on it. But
they make it pretty clear that we are going in a romance direction. The guy at first is like, I'm not interested in her at all, but by the end he's like, she's kind of cute or whatever. So I'm like, and I mean, the show is billed as a romance. I mean, it's not a surprise that that's the direction they're going. Also we have, as soon as you add that element, especially to that situation with an adult that is in a position to take advantage of a child, is like, nope.
I mean, the power dynamics there are even more fucked than they would be normally, quite frankly. So
like in the first show, I mean, the girl can go back home or something. Like, she's not this guy is basically in charge of her life at the moment. Like, he's providing food and shelter for her. It's very icky. So pick your poison on that one. Just weird that we got two shows like that in one season.
Simultaneously. Yeah.
But if you're looking for fun romantic comedies,
look elsewhere.
This is not the season. This is not the season. But what did you say, Iro?
I said look elsewhere.
Yes, look elsewhere. I don't think you're going to find one this season, though, as we'll get to later. But
whoa.
All right, let's keep moving. Let's talk about, I don't know how you're actually supposed to pronounce this. Vivy, Fluorite Eyes Song. Did any of you guys watch this one, or was it just me?
Yeah.
We watched, G and I watched the first episode.
I actually did catch the second episode last night. It was like 1 in the morning.
Sure.
I was like,
By second episode, do you mean the third episode? Because it was two.
No, only the second. Just
right. I know this aired with 2 episodes at the beginning, and I only saw the first episode of that.
I have not seen this, so...
Yeah, so this is my pitch for this was what if you replaced Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator with Hatsune Miku?
Yeah, what if Miku was
is
I'll be back.
Not quite not quite what the actual plot is, but it is like
also like, Jill, you say this, but like after watching the first episode, isn't Miku technically like John Connor in this analogy? Like because
I mean, realistically, the analogy does not.
Timeline, so realistically, she's not the one going back in time.
Realistically, the analogy does not work.
No, but yes, I get it. For the sake of a good headline, yes, Miku is the Terminator.
The plot of this.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you watched more, so go ahead.
Yeah. So the idea is there are AIs. Humanity has created these advanced AIs. They don't work great, so they have to like hyper specialize each one to only do like one thing.
Right.
And somehow 100 years in the future, everything goes wrong to where the AIs have just decided to kill all humanity. And as the sort of last-ditch effort to save humankind, this scientist guy sends another AI back to 100 years in the past to this one AI that was like the first like fully autonomous AI and just happened to be like a singer.
At a theme park,
At a theme park. And but she has like full autonomy to like make decisions and things like that. That's
at first I was like, wait, you built your first fully autonomous AI and you basically gave her the job of an animatronic Chuck E. Cheese.
Yes.
But then I thought more about it and I was like, well,
that kind of checks out.
You wouldn't want your first fully autonomous AI to work at, say, a nuclear power plant or like handling the codes for the nukes.
Right. Give it a low stakes job, right?
Yeah.
But and I thought there were some interesting like concepts things going on, like a bit like there's a bit of interesting world building and things, kind of like as to how the AIs function in this world.
Yeah.
And
I will say this was a very minor thing in episode 1, but when it's because we get this extended sequence of like the robots killing humans, but
man,
like the fucking camera drones like human spotted, and instead of pulling out a like gun or something, they just fly at terminal velocity into the human's head. Like,
right.
It's pretty. It's a
like,
lot.
man,
it's a lot.
all right.
Well, I think those, because that was at the theme park. I don't think they were
Yeah.
like designed for combat.
Right,
Right.
but
That was,
that's
like,
why-
a
that's
heavy-
what makes it fun.
yeah, it's what makes
right.
it like, oh, jeez, okay, yeah, gosh.
Oh God, right. It's,
Yeah.
It's,
Because the whole, so like I think reading the description of the show, I thought it was going to be more of like a musical type of fun idol show or something, but like the first like opening minute of the show is all humanity getting murdered.
Yeah.
So like there's no question as to like what is
well, the vibe I get from it, right, is that like singing, singing is like the core value that was put inside of
Diva.
or inside of Diva, but like very clearly like the focus of the story shifts more to like that sort of Terminator-esque, like how do we stop Skynet from happening, right?
Right.
And I don't know. I was surprised by how into it I was actually. I think it does some interesting things, and I kind of understand what you mean, Jel, when you said that the first 2 episodes do kind of need to exist as a pair,
yeah.
because
Okay.
There's a twist in episode 2.
I do think episode 2 is where I went from this is kind of interesting to okay, now you have me. Like this.
All right, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, we should check it out later, but like it's
I think it was a very deliberate choice for them to put both of those episodes out.
yes,
at the same
because
time.
like I don't want to get into it, right, because but like it's good. It sets it up in an interesting way, right? Because at first, episode 1 clearly sets up the sort of like odd couple of the AI that's sent from the future and Diva, and episode 2 does some interesting things with that dynamic that
Yeah.
I would like to see how that develops, especially because then episode 2's next episode preview, episode 3, had me going, wait, how do we get to that from the end of this episode?
Yeah, I have, and episode 3 is out. Neither of us, I don't think has had time to
seen it.
watch it, but I like there's so many small things I think the show does good, even if maybe the big picture is not like super creative or anything. But the relationship between Diva and this other AI that's gone back, I can't remember his name, is like they feel like robots talking to each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like they don't like there's a lot of cold hard robot logic and not as much like human emotion in their interactions.
Yeah, like even the other AI which inhabits the body of like this animatronic teddy bear, like even though he is like clearly like it's clear that he has been programmed with the like jokey, affable trickster personality, but like underneath all of that, he is still very much a cold, calculating robot.
Right.
And
I
wouldn't.
It's interesting that they were able to capture that feeling
Yeah.
in the dialogue of like
Like-
this is actually 2 robots talking to each other. This
Yeah,
is not 2
like-
humans talking to each other.
I wouldn't dare like compare it to the heights of the thing I'm about to bring up, but like it almost gave me a little bit of Nier Automata vibes of like whenever 9S and 2B would talk at the beginning, right?
Yes.
The whole emotions are prohibited stuff. Like
Right.
there's a little bit of that in the dynamic between these 2 characters of like
Yeah.
they're portrayed as fully sentient characters in the context of the fiction, but
But the personalities are an artifice, right?
yes, totally. And I'm into it. I want to see where this goes, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much room for this to go bad.
Oh, totally.
I'm not like saying that everybody needs to watch this and it's going to be great, but it's done enough to intrigue me. Like I
Yeah.
want to know what's going to happen, like G said. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. All right. Much more disappointing. I will talk about Dragon Goes House Hunting. Y'all said this looked like a show for me, and I agreed. And like the ingredients were there for it, and it was just bad. So again, the concept: this is a comedy about a dragon who gets kicked out of his house and has to go. He teams up with a shady elf real estate agent to go find a house.
This feels like that feels like the pitch for like a Will Ferrell film from the mid-2000s.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh,
except again, this is like a literal dragon. It's not like a human that is also a dragon. It's like literally a dragon. So I'm thinking the comedy is going to be like, look how silly it is when they apply, modern day real estate lingo to fantasy setting, right?
Right, like trying to like negotiate on the lease for the horrible poison swamp.
Right, like they do a little bit of that. Like the first scene is like the shady real estate elf selling a house to like these two slimes, and like they're going over their list of things that a slime would want in a house, and it's like okay, that's kind of clever and funny. And then they just kind of throw out the window when the dragon guy shows up, and the humor switches over from that to, wow, this guy's supposed to be this big, powerful dragon, but he absolutely sucks at everything.
Whoa.
And they just, like, grind that joke into fine dust particles throughout the rest of the...
Yeah, I don't think any of us here watched it, but just the way you described the jokes and the screen caps you showed is just
so like I was telling you, there's a couple things. First of all, the dragon, he's super annoying because he's like a total crybaby. Like, there's one scene where he literally just cries for 30 seconds on screen until the characters take pity on him. And it's like, it's not like a underdog sort of, like he was like a dragon from a rich family and he just sucked, so they kicked him out, like, and he doesn't do anything to help himself. He just like rolls around in a ball and cries.
So like, are we meant to hate the main character then? Like, is he meant to be shitty?
I think you're supposed to, no, I don't think you're supposed to hate him. I think you're supposed to think it's funny that, like, oh look, he's supposed to be a big strong dragon guy and he sucks. The other thing is, like, they go heavy into the video game mechanics and they don't have to at all.
Right.
Like, there's absolutely no reason.
Just
like, I
do not understand this.
I already told you guys the worst example, but for the listeners, like, there's one part where he has to fly up a tree, and rather than saying, "Oh, I never learned how to fly," he says, "I never unlocked the fly action," and I'm like,
Oh.
Okay, so here's the thing, right?
Why?
Look, guys, Wizardry was an extremely influential game.
They're making a new one for
Japanese
smartphones.
Yes.
okay.
But like this just breaks the basic like rule of storytelling, which is basically if you can do it with less, do it with less. Yeah. I've never understood like the fascination with the whole kind of like, oh well, it's much more interesting if you explain the system behind it.
Because Japan's foundation with Western
completely
European fantasy
vector, right?
was based on video games, right?
Right.
It didn't come from Tolkien. It didn't come from like,
came from
like
Dragon
literature.
Quest.
Came from Wizardry, which
it came from Wizardry,
and by
which came from
extension,
D&D.
Dragon Quest.
Yeah, like it's they've always like their conception of European fantasy is game. It's
right.
gamified,
Yeah.
right?
I guess it makes much more sense in that.
And
context.
there have been shows that have taken the game mechanics and like done something with it to like build other types of jokes and things out of it. But this is just like completely unnecessary. You could have just deleted them from, existence in the show.
Right, like at that point, like it almost feels more like that's just like some like fucking out of date exec who's like, well, the kids like the video games, so like
gotta appeal to the gamers, right?
Yeah.
So, yep, real disappointed on that one because I like the potential's there. It's a good premise for comedy, and I think it might get a little bit better because most of the episode he has not teamed up with the elf guy yet, and by the end they're together. So maybe once they get into the actual house hunting, it'll be a little bit better. But
do you care to find out?
I do not care enough to find out.
So let's move on.
Let's move on. All right, let's talk about the surprising return of The World Ends With You, anime based on the
speaking of video game mechanics.
Possibly borderline cult favorite, but is it a hit or is it a cult favorite?
I would call
cult
The
classic.
World Ends With You a cult classic. Like,
Okay,
it is definitely very well liked amongst certain people.
Yes, super stylish video game back on the DS many years ago.
Yeah.
Possibly the last good video game that Square Enix ever made.
Yes, in fact, I would.
and somehow it got an anime in 2021. And
I think it
as
is
a
being
commercial
timed
for
with
the
new
sequel,
video game. Yeah.
I
what
guess
it
they're
is.
finally making a sequel or whatever. But what did you guys think of the anime adaptation.
It's an anime adaptation of The World Ends With
Yeah.
You, and
It's
I think
the integration of the game mechanic stuff is super clumsy. Like, they're literally doing the thing where, like, okay, you have to kill.
They
all
have
these
arrows on
yeah.
screen or something.
No, but like just
quite, but
just kind of like there is no attempt to kind of adapt the context of the things they do in the game into
It's like
a narrative story.
Right. It's like the game.
They could have just been, we need to work together or something,
some
right?
kind of,
But like,
yeah. It had like a mission structure in the game to progress, and plot happened during those missions. But of course, the anime still has the missions of kill 5 wolves or whatever.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels.
It's an interesting.
I was just going to say, it just feels like nobody tried to streamline that aspect of the story.
Yeah,
I mean, I feel like that's a. I don't agree with that choice, but it's a choice you could make when you're literally adapting a video game. In a video game that is also kind of video gamey in context, right?
Right. Like I think I don't necessarily. In fact, I think that like many of the World's Ends With You mechanics are legitimately interesting, and I think actually do contribute to the plot in some key ways. I think for me, where the World Ends With You, the anime, like I need to see how it plays out further, is that it was a video game, and not only was it a video game, it was a JRPG, which means there was a lot of incidental downtime in between the big plot beats, right? Like you spent a lot of that game running around Tokyo, talking to people. And you can't really do that in an anime, right? Like you can't really have the scene of Neku talking to NPC number 33, right? Like that just can't exist in an anime. So like they go through like the plot of the game like really fast. Like by the end of that first episode, I was like, wait a second, are we already at like, okay, Neku's already choking out Shiki. Wow, we are just already we're already here, huh? Like it's moving extremely quickly. And it makes me wonder how they're going to handle this thing as a whole, because it's just like, it sort of like reminds me of like the Persona anime, right? Of like, can you actually fit the story of Persona into like a serial 26 episode anime? Like probably not.
Well,
I mean, the main story, but the main story is not
the texture of playing.
Not the texture, not the feeling, right?
I mean, that's kind of the same issue, which is there is not actually that much plot, but at the same time, there is a lot of plot. I know that sounds kind of counter, but like, it's that a lot of things happen. Not all of them are important, but a lot of them need to be included to get the verisimilitude of the experience over.
I mean, that's kind of why we never really get great game adaptations, because you can't. No, If a game is very good, a lot of it has to do with it being a game and not a anime.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that the best game stories take advantage of the medium being interactive in some form or another.
Right.
And you can't.
Like
you can be the best anime director in the world. You can't recreate that in an anime.
Fighting 5 wolves is interesting in a video game because the mechanics are interesting. Fighting 5 wolves in an anime is like, well, what's the actual endpoint?
Also in a game, fighting 5 wolves is a means to an end, but that end is removed in a straight narrative adaptation. Yes. So how many times can you fight 5 wolves? The answer is once before it becomes boring.
I will say, like, in the favor of the anime, I actually did legitimately enjoy the technical execution of many parts of it. I think they did a fairly decent job of adapting the art style of the game in the anime. Like, it looks like that.
Yeah.
It looks like that game. It gave me that feeling, that like early 2000s like urban culture nostalgia that like that game embodied so well.
At least until it begins to move.
I think that the CG is like...
No, it's not the CG that's the problem. I think the CG is actually fairly well integrated.
Okay, but I thought the CG for the noise was actually like surprisingly well done.
It's just very limited. Like the movement is very slow. It looks like they're animating on 3s or 4s.
Some moving picture action type of thing.
Not quite that level, but it's more like you can tell that like they can't really truly capture these sort of like kinetic like franticness of the game's combat.
You maybe get like one big camera swing or one pan or something
like the big highlight is probably just the way they adapt Neku and Shiki's dual tech is pretty fun, but even then they reuse it twice in the same episode, and so it's like well, it was a cool animation, you know. Okay, we're watching it again, I guess. It's like, it's an interesting situation, and you know what? I will say this: if this gives us a whole new soundtrack composed by The World Ends With You guy, or music that sounds like The World Ends With You, like, I'm probably still here for it. There's at least one new track in the anime so far that is definitely not from the original game that, like, sounded like it would have fit the game perfectly. So, like, to me, that's already sort of a net gain.
Right. In a lot of ways, the soundtrack is almost more of an enduring legacy than the game itself, right? So
I will also shout out real quick that, look, if the news comes out later that this dude actually did some really fucked up shit, I will immediately retract this statement. But in the meantime, I don't think they should have removed the Ali opening. Like, look, just because a drummer committed a little fraud doesn't mean you need to get rid of the whole song, all right? Like,
yeah. You know, we talked about the Jujutsu Kaisen ED and, of course, the Beastars OP too, right? It's all the same people, right?
Yeah, it's Ali.
Do you think they're going to get retroactively pulled off Netflix
dude,
or something?
That would be so fucking sad if that happened. Like,
that would be, yeah. Well, you know.
That said, they replaced the OP with Calling, like not even like a remix of Calling, just Calling the original track from the video game.
That's not bad.
There's a part of me that was like, you know what? That was a pretty good song.
All right.
It works.
Are you guys going to keep watching it?
Probably a bit.
I'll check out more of it.
I think I might give it a pass.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a show that for some reason I'm going to give a few more episodes.
All right. Let's talk about 86.
86. You have to say both. You have to say 86.
You have to say both.
86, 86. Do we need to put a spoiler warning on this discussion, or is it obvious enough what's going to happen?
I think it's obvious.
As far as the twist.
I don't think that twist was literally revealed in like the description of the show.
I mean, I've heard there are yet more twists to come, but
okay. But as far as what happens in episode 1, that's pretty obvious.
I think it's obvious, like from like minute 8. Like,
okay, so this was the show about a future where warfare is
your young, pretty, silver-haired lady in
right.
Yeah,
but it's they're fighting a war with quote unquote drones. And G wanted to watch it because people were wearing brown military uniforms, but
yes,
that
is completely correct. That is the entire foundation of why.
They're kind of going for like this, you know, split nation type thing, or I don't even know if it's different nations or if it's just completely different perspectives on this drone warfare.
I'm placing my bets that everyone in Silverhair Land is on the moon or in space.
Okay, yeah. So we start out in the first half of the episode with, as Ira mentioned, the silver-haired moon people that are like this
lovely utopian society, and
right,
everything's
and everybody
great because
everybody looks exactly the same, and it's like culturally what's the word I'm looking for? Homogenous. And, you know, our main character is this young lady who is like a genius tactician or something.
The youngest to ever reach the rank of major.
Up and coming military officer.
Yes, and she's a handler who controls the drones.
Yes.
Right.
And the premise that is at least presented to the public is that the reason their society is so peaceful is because they have found a way to commit what they call ethical warfare, fought entirely with unmanned drones. Thus, there are never any casualties in the war with East Asia. It's not actually called East Asia, but we are getting
but yes,
yeah, the analogy is...
Yes. We have always been at war with East Asia.
And we're going to win in 2 years, and all war will be over, and it'll be great.
Yes. And of course, the twist is that actually there is a secret, like, district of their nation for whom they recruit exclusively from to actually be the real pilots of the mechs that they use in warfare.
Right.
And the military just get into their quad monitor, set up rooms, and enters game, controls
them like RTS units, basically.
Right. But the reason why the twist is kind of telegraphed is because, like, the main girl treats the drones like people,
Oh,
basically,
no.
and everyone's
Right,
like,
like the people,
wow, you're
like
so
the drones
weird.
literally talk back to the handlers, so it's impossible for you to be even remotely convinced that like
Right, but
that
I
these are
mean,
not
nobody
real
in the
people.
military is convinced. Like, they all know, is what I got
Right.
out of that. It's just they
Right, I would say
don't care.
Right, like the most interesting like wrinkle of this for me probably was that this is actually not a particularly well hid secret. But hey, guess what? The Holocaust was also not a particularly well hid secret. The reality is that society just chose to accept like this monstrous situation for the sake of like
Not
The
being shot in
appearance
the
of
street,
normalcy.
like, yeah.
exactly.
Or right, but yeah, so you get the contrast of this like super rich and clean utopian society versus, you know, when we go to the actual squadron, you know, they're in this like rundown barracks, and
Yeah.
you know, coincidentally this is, you know, a multicultural group, multiracial group of people that are being
Yes.
controlled by these, you know, silver-haired moon people. There's probably like a ton of themes to unpack and all this that I don't know if the show is even going to
Yeah.
come anywhere near
Yeah, and
exploring in some meaningful way, but
So
anime
the
doesn't
way
have
I'm
an
approaching this-
incredible record when it comes to kind of these very, you know, high concept underclass, like
Right.
class war things happening.
So, the reality is that I'm mostly approaching this from the perspective of, like, I have a soft spot for anime military fiction. Like, I love Valkyria Chronicles. Ace Combat is, like, unironically in my, like, top 5 favorite fictional universes.
Yeah, what
in
is a
fiction.
nation?
Yes, like I legitimately love the Ace Combat world building. Like, it's not that I like purely military fiction, it's that I like military fiction filtered through a very specific type of anime sensibility. And
Right.
thus, yes, if I were to try to interrogate 86 on some of the checks it seems like it's trying to cash, I think it will probably prove out to fail eventually. But as a thing that gives me the same vibes as the first 3 episodes of Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans, I am willing to at least like entertain
Right.
what this
Right.
show
It's
is
like-
playing.
we
with
all know how well that show delivered its message.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Like that is why I said I'm willing to
Right.
entertain
Like,
it right now.
I
but
question the show's, like, intent on message when, like, specifically with the commander lady, because she is your anime waifu who
right.
wears her miniskirt, garter, military uniform, and changes on camera, and
Ugh.
goes squee over cake, and then cries so much for these soldiers that she's coming to her death from the safety of her quad monitor setup room, and we're like, and it feels like we're supposed to take it seriously that she's the only one who really cares.
Right, that's like where the yes,
But-
yes, it's those aspects where this definitely starts to fall
Right.
apart. Right,
And
It's
like I'm certainly way more invested in the people on the ground who are like, we got a new fucking pig commander telling us what to do.
yeah, like it's,
I'm like,
you
yeah.
know, the Suicide Squad kids that we see in the second half of the anime are very like, you have seen like this archetype of crew members a million times in anime of the like, we're the rejects, but we're still pretty anime people, you know. But that part works for me enough that I'd like to at least see how it plays out. But yes, the silver-haired moon people side of it is where I'm concerned it's not going to work out, because like, you know, we were treated to a scene where she enters the military HQ, and you literally see military officers just like drinking and smoking in the lobby, and it's like,
Right.
look, I don't care how like unprofessional your military is, I don't care like how much of a sham this whole artifice is, like, it's just a little too comical, right? That
Right.
she is the one good officer, and literally every other
Right.
officer is this walking gross caricature of like what military leadership is.
I mean, you're using
And
a
it's like-
sledgehammer to make a point when you need a chisel, basically.
Right, exactly. It's like, you know, you can portray your military leadership as like scummy and shitty in ways that don't require you to like literally have shots of them like throwing empty beer cans into the fountain in the lobby.
I mean,
you know,
one might argue that if you're trying to keep up the masquerade, you might make more of make even more of an effort to portray yourself as outwardly professional. So
right. So the fact that they don't, it's just like that part of it is like, as you said, it's using a sledgehammer where like it's completely unnecessary.
Like it might have been more effective it would have been more effective rather to have them just be acting professionally and be just that more like callous towards.
Right, like go more like Yorha, Glory to Mankind angle rather than like.
I mean, corruption is always more effective when it's under the surface. You know, when you have to do a little digging to reveal the rot. And
right, so the fact that it's like so blatantly shown in like the opening, it's not a subtle show. It really isn't. And I'm not watching this show expecting like subtle or nuanced takes on the themes it's playing with, but. The spider tanks are kind of cool, okay? There's a little bit of wow cool robot going on.
Yeah, I was going to say how much
just, like,
wow cool robot is there.
So the design of the spider tank is really fun because it's like 80% gun, 20% legs. Like these tanks are literally just walking platforms to transport these giant anti-material cannons. Yeah. And Bandai already announced that they're releasing kits for these.
Now we're getting to the heart of this.
These spider tanks, and I'm like, I'm gonna buy a couple of those probably.
All right. Well, I think the first episode was like a net positive. I guess we're not feeling super great about it being able to maintain.
I mean, of all the premieres I watched, of all the shows that we're talking about here that I will watch the second episode of, 86 is definitely on the shakiest foundation of them.
Yeah. Right.
Which is a pity because it seems to be playing with like some of the biggest themes going.
Yeah, no, it's definitely bringing stuff up.
Right, which is why it has all the more reason or all the more ways to fail. So.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely more interesting than what I was expecting, to say the least, at the very least. So, like, I got a lot of things to watch, so maybe I'll hear what you guys say about episode 2 first. But
sure.
I'll keep my keep an eye on that. All right, let's talk about my possibly favorite show.
Oh my god. You got a lot to sell here, Jill.
All right, let's talk about Pretty Boy Detective Club. This was the reuniting of author Nisio Eisen and director Akiyuki Shimbo over at Shaft.
Getting the crew back together, huh?
This show, so this felt like peak late 2000s Shaft, like really super weird, but without any of the, well, not really any of the pervy stuff. Just like weird Shimbo's weird directing, and it's like if it were half a step weirder, it would feel like an Ikehara anime, like that kind of thing.
But my issue with that comparison, which happens occasionally, is that Shimbo's symbolism never seems to be in service of anything, you know, and certainly Ikuhara falls into that as well sometimes, but, you know, he seems to be weird for the sake of being weird, which is fine, you know. I think it produces some interesting shows, but...
Have you watched this?
No, I have not. I must disclaim that up front, although I have watched a considerable amount of Monogatari against my will, so...
This is... Yeah, no, I think you... I don't know if you would like it, but I think you should watch it.
I plan to.
There's, like, when I say it feels like that peak era from, 10 years ago, I also feel like there is a certain evolution to both Nisio Eisen's writing and the directing that feels better than those days. The general premise is there's a Pretty Boy Detective Club. And there are 3 rules to Pretty Boy Detective Club. Number 1, be pretty. Number 2, be a boy.
Wait,
which they kind of clarify.
Can I guess the third one?
Well,
no, I want to guess it.
Finish.
Is it don't talk about Fight Club?
That's the 4th one.
Okay.
The second rule is be a boy, which they sort of clarify as more of maintain your youthful spirit. I will summarize it that way. And yes, rule number 3, be a detective. And it's kind of so the main character is a girl who goes to the Pretty Boy Detective Club to help her find a star, which was her inspiration for her dreams as a youth, wanting to be an astronaut and all that. But her parents have told her now to give up on her dreams now that she's, going to be entering second year of middle school or something like that, and she's lost her way, and now she's come to the Pretty Boy Detective Club to find her way. And it's very like high concept, surreal sort of presentation, and I kind of loved it.
Okay.
Does it still do the Nisio thing where people just talk forever?
There is a lot of talking. We are not anywhere near Monogatari levels on it. And trust me, I was ready to hate this thing because the first thing you see is a quote from Voltaire about defending your whatever. And I'm like, oh god, here we go. And there is still some of the like the big Nisio trademark in the writing is the, well, this is something, but really it's something else. One of the opening lines is something to the effect of, it's beautiful to pursue your dreams, but it can also be beautiful to give up on your dreams or something. I'm like, oh god, here we go. But by the end of the episode, I was pretty sold on it. And there's...
So, here's another...
I don't want to give away too much.
Here's another question, then.
Okay.
How much of it is improved by the simple fact that they cannot or will not just relentlessly ogle the cast?
I mean, that's one of the biggest criticisms you could probably have of Shaft from that era, right? So if you take that out, it does help quite a bit.
Yes. I mean, like, I'm not being facetious. I do think that without that,
I mean, Yeah, and I feel like there is more... there's more... When you take that element out, there's more room to explore the characters and themes and not just, oh, look, hot anime characters.
Yeah, and like, I think there's...
I will note... There is at least a little bit of ogling. Like, there's one of the boys, his thing is, I have beautiful legs, and the camera, and that's pretty much the only time Shimbo decides to pull out his creeper cam, is when they talk about his legs. But other than that, it's not anywhere. If we were to go in a time machine and go back to, the early, Bakemonogatari days or something like that, it's not anything in that
I was going to say, the camera is not literally, like, flying up between people's legs and stuff.
Right.
Like, and I think there's an interesting debate to be had there as, like, well, should it do that? Should there really be equality here, and should the boys be getting just as naked as the ladies? But, it's...
There is some of that. That's why I said most of the perv cam is gone. There is still some of it if you're looking for the equal opportunity with the boys. So it's not like oh, they're boys, so obviously we're not going to do any of that stuff anymore. So there's still a little bit of that, but it's not as overwhelming, I guess, as we would have seen in the past. Also interesting, this does not happen in the first episode, but I think they're implying that the main girl gets turned into a boy at some point. I don't know if that's going to happen or if they're going to go anywhere with that. Or
you want to talk about Ikuhara-esque things. Playing with gender lines is very much a thing.
Yeah, so I don't know. But there's a lot of... It's a good balance of bringing up the themes that I think the show is going to tackle, which is really centered around the whole, do you continue to pursue your dreams or do you give up and live like a quote-unquote normal person, as sort of the crux of the show, and a lot of other sort of vague things that they can work with in the future on it. And I just really love the presentation of it.
Yeah, I mean, when Shimbo is on, he produces astonishing-looking stuff.
The other big difference between now and 2009 is they have money. It looks very good.
I mean, Monogatari looked very good. Stuff like Sasami-san looked good.
The like, well, I'm going back to like Sayonara Zetsubo Sensei or something like that. But the like mid to late 2000s Shaft, when part of the joke was that they did not have any money. Even you might even want to say the like pre-Madoka era, because that's when they really hit it big. But Yeah, I'll admit some of that was sort of the nostalgia of that era hitting me watching this a little bit, but I just thought it was very entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like something that is worth giving a shot at the least.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to sell you guys because Zig, you might like it. I think you should watch it. I know.
Yeah,
you would hate it. I'm talking to the audience out there that might be into this, but
and
I really like it.
It's worth pointing out as well that as much as I hate the Monogatari's, I think episode 12 of Bakemonogatari is one of the best episodes of anime I've ever seen. It's just every other episode of that show is unbearable. So, Nishioisin has his moments.
When they're hitting on all cylinders, they can make very good content.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to say this was their best work, but it was.
Sounds like it's worth checking out.
It was pushing the right buttons for me personally.
Cool.
All right. From that,
well, speaking of pushing buttons,
let's go to Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro. I don't think you guys haven't had a chance to watch this, right?
No.
Not yet. I meant to, but
I have no intention to watch this.
So, as the refresher, this was the show about the sad sack second-year high school kid who gets bullied by his underclassmen, but, since she's a cute girl, it's okay. And all right, let me preface this first by saying this was not nearly as bad as it could have been. There are worse things I have watched this season, including probably the one about the adult men romancing the high school girls.
I mean, from a thematic perspective, yes, that's way worse.
Yeah. That said, I hated this.
I mean, I think the question I would have for you is how much is this thing just purely a fetish thing? Because I ain't here to kink shame anybody, but if that's all it is, then
that's the second podcast episode in a row we've had to say that. But
95% of this show is fetish bait, right? I mean, that's kind of.
So here's the thing: ostensibly, this should be a comedy, right?
Yes.
They don't really make any effort to make jokes. It's just literally her bullying him. For example, there's one bit where she's like, "Oh, hey, I have something to tell you. Do you want to go out with me?" And he's like, and she's like, "Psych, ha, I was just joking." And that's it. That's not even a joke.
Yeah,
that's just that's just
man, that's.
I mean, that's barely even bullying as well, Because,
well, I mean, that's the other thing. I don't want to grade bullying, but what she's doing, at least in episode 1, is not really all that intense. I don't know if it's going to get worse as time goes on.
I mean, the reality is that this manga came a long way from its origins. It's very much it is a far tamer, cleaner version of.
We talked about last time in the preview how this was its original incarnation was basically porn.
Yes,
but which in itself is not necessarily.
I mean, a lot of great anime have started in that sort of realm. So.
But there's really, it really does feel like it's just masochist fetish material.
Right.
Okay, so I'll give you one more example, and I'm still trying to figure this one out. So first of all, the main guy is just so. He's like a total. It's kind of like that when I was talking about the dragon in the Dragon Show. He's a total crybaby. He spends the entire episode just practically crawling on the ground, shivering and crying.
Right, but
before the girls even do anything.
But this is not this is not intended to be taken seriously, right? It's not it's not a deep analysis of a broken mind. He's.
No, they have a flashback scene where he was getting bullied in the past, and that's why he's so
sure.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what they're trying to do with this. I think they just want somebody who is going to sit there and take it as this girl steps on him.
Yeah.
So that in itself was annoying to watch. But like there was one really weird bit that I'm still trying to unpack where it was like, okay, this is not so she's like making fun of his, like, she finds out that he draws manga and she found it and she's like making fun of him about it.
Sure.
And he literally starts crying. They're like in the library. And they have this one scene where she takes her handkerchief and they get to like this extreme close up of his eye and her putting the handkerchief up to his eye and soaking up his tears. Okay. And it goes on for like an uncomfortably long amount of time.
Okay.
And I'm like, is this like a sex thing that I'm not aware of? Or
it sounds like it.
Like what is happening? There's like this uncomfortably
maybe
long
it's
amount of time.
intended to depict vulnerability. Like
it's like all the way zoomed up into his eyes. So like all you see is like the handkerchief, his eye, and like the handkerchief absorbing his tears. And then she gives him the handkerchief, and
maybe the episode director harbors ambitions to make a Saw movie one of these days.
I'm like, is this some mysterious girlfriend X level of like, I don't know what was going on, man. But none of it felt like a comedy, and all of it felt like, you know,
Mysterious Girlfriend X actually was a sex thing. So
also,
yes.
Mysterious Girlfriend X.
That show was actually great.
Recently re-released on Blu-ray. So
yeah. And that show is actually great. So you can do this, but
I mean, I guess that was the root of my question. Is that, like, you know, is this a show that happens to have this thing in it, or is this just this thing? You know,
it's right. It's just this thing, and there's not even like a lot of like explicitly sexual things going on screen. But like you can tell, like it feels like it's just like designed in a lab to appeal to a certain section of the anime fandom or something.
There is a place for those things, but as mainstream entertainment, perhaps not.
But if you're looking for something that's going to be like a fun, charming comedy in spite of the fetishy stuff, you're not going to get that here. So I don't know. It's just one day I will, you know, write my 20-page essay on the evolution of this genre from, you know, Takagi-san to Zaki-chan to this, but I'm too tired to go through all that now. But yeah. All right. Some of these shows didn't make it on our preview because we didn't think they were going to be good, but I wanted to mention them. One of them being Super Cub. This is the girl gets a motorcycle show.
Yes.
Okay.
The obligatory girl.
Is the stick in this one also, or
no? So here's
does this actually have
not
like licensing from Honda, because like the Super Cub is a trademark. So
yes, there is some pretty significant Honda product placement in this one. But no, I actually liked this because it turned out I was expecting it to just be another, you know, transfer student joins the school club show, but it's not. It's like a hardcore slice of life show. So like for all those people out there who are sad that Laid Back Camp and Nanon Biori ended last season, this is the show for you. Check this one out. You know, by hardcore slice of life, I mean like there's almost no sound or dialogue, nor no music or dialogue. It's a lot of this girl just riding her motorcycle around and enjoying her life, which I liked. It was a little dry, I will admit, but like I think in the next episodes they're going to be introducing more characters. I think if that can kind of inject a little more life into it, I think it'd be just like a nice, chill, pleasant show to watch. And I know those other two shows I mentioned are very popular, particularly Laid Back Camp. But so yeah, I depending on what is left after some of these shows inevitably disappoint us, I may continue watching this. But I liked it as far as filling that the need for that genre in. Let's keep moving because we are over time. let's talk about Odd Taxi.
Yeah.
This was a surprise, huh?
Yeah.
This is the sleeper. This is the one.
Yeah, this is
So Odd Taxi is
Interesting.
like cute Animal Crossing people.
Yakuza plot, like
Some
But
drug smuggling.
it's about a walrus taxi driver.
a walrus who was
Kidding.
apparently abandoned in the back of a taxi as a child, so decided to become a taxi driver.
So
Yes.
the thing I wanted,
And he gets
the thing I wa-
tied up in some
Yeah.
things.
The thing I want to put out about this one is that, like, the way we've introduced it, it makes it sound like it's cutesy, but it's dark, and
Right.
I think
No,
it's actually
it's
a
not-
good deal more subtle than that. You know,
Right.
oh yeah, definitely.
like it has,
I think
it has a weird lived-in vibe. You know, it feels very authentically. You know, the people are worn down. They have inane conversations about stupid things.
This could have just been a live action drama.
Absolutely.
yeah.
but rather than a live action drama, it's animal people.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
animated.
And they occasionally allude to that, but it's
Here's
not.
the thing: if you're doing this as an anime, like it's better to do it this way than to just draw regular human beings. I think.
right,
Right. But yeah, no, Zig, I know what you're saying because I wouldn't describe it as dark, but it does get heavy. Like there are
it
various societal issues and
it's
things that it brings
it's
up.
adult, not in the like pornographic sense, but in the
Right.
sense that
Right.
it feels very much like a show written for grown-ups by grown-ups.
Yes. But that said, we all say this, but also like there is the implication of something a little bit more sinister going on in the background. Like I don't mean to say yes, dark, but like, you know, they talk about how the walrus guy, our protagonist, is like not sleeping, right?
Yeah.
He needs medication, and he is looking to get stronger medication.
He seems
right?
to
Like,
be
there's-
on the books of the cops already.
Right, he is chummy with corrupt policemen.
I mean, he's not-
There is a baboon with a gun out there on the streets, man.
The lovely nurse is
missing
smuggling
girl,
prescription drugs out of the clinic.
yeah. The nurse is smuggling drugs. Like it's, and again, you're right that this is adult in the sense of like, yes, actually these are all actually surprisingly mundane things that happen in the real world every day, right? Like yes, like everything we just said is probably happening in the world right
Yes.
now, but as the subject matter and being presented in the way it is, like I think it's the moment where like the walrus is like talking like seemingly like implied to be to someone, but that person is not shown in his apartment.
Right.
Like really started to like send a chill
So
down my spine
it's
a little bit.
heavily
Like, what is-
implied that the
runaway
missing high school girl. Third show about high school girls and adult men.
Yeah, but okay, but like the thing, but then it's like, well, what's
Why is she in the
Yeah.
closet?
why is she not saying?
and he keeps
anything, right? It's
saying
like, there's
he
a-
keeps saying you
and-
you know you can run away, you know you can leave at any point, right?
right, and it's like
Why do you got to
So-
tell
so it's
yourself
like-
that,
it-
buddy?
right. So it's like, is the walrus just like gruff and bad with words, or like what? And again, I'm not saying, he's a kidnapper or something, and he's delusional, but it's like there's enough of like there's enough
Implication,
of
yeah.
like implication of a type of tension in the presentation of the story that I'm like, I want to
Yeah,
see where this goes.
I mean, I
yeah.
joked about this when we were watching it, and I think it is a joke, but there are a few parallels to the famous film Taxi Driver here, you know, in the
Yeah.
sense that, like, you know, there is a taxi driver, a older, slightly more cynical man who is protecting, he thinks, a young girl. There's a bunch of bent cops and all sorts of weird things going around. I think it's probably a coincidence, but it's a nicely fitting one.
Yeah.
And it definitely has that sort of like early 70s Scorsese sort of like worn down, grizzled protagonist
Yeah.
stuff going
And
on.
it's very funny to talk about it like that when,
Yeah.
like, again, the presentation is like these characters are like Animal Crossing, like
There's a
Yeah.
sheep, there's a poodle idol, you know, who sings idol
Right.
songs and stuff. It's
yeah.
it's fascinating.
Zig, I don't know. You mentioned Taxi Driver. They did make a "We Are the World" joke, so this would be the age demographic
Yeah.
of people that would
Oh
be
my
making taxi
God, it
references.
totally would.
We Are the World is a bad song. Sorry, guys. It's
It is.
a
It's a
really
terrible
terrible
song,
song. Like, great cause,
Uh,
terrible song.
Well, you know what's a good song? The OP. Shout outs to the OP.
Okay,
of
yes, the
Odd
OP was
Taxi.
great.
Oh
Yes.
man, that OP bangs hard. Holy shit! Like I was not ready for.
I was not ready for
ready for
anything that was happening with the show,
Right.
to be honest. But
And I think the way we've talked about it might make it sound like a bit grim, and I want to emphasize it's not that. Again, it is not dark in that sense. It is, kind of just a little bit, like I said, ground down in the way that sometimes real life is. Like there's a sense of all these people are doing the thing they do, and sometimes that just gets to you a little bit. It's not an aesthetic we see a lot in anime, which tends to be, it's very operatic. Things are crazy. Everybody is at maximum emotion all the time, and
Right.
I like.
Well, anime is usually dealing with high school kids who are going to be like that more so
Right,
than
like
adults.
there's a certainly a fun lived-inness of it, right? Like
Right.
there's that great conversation with like the fucking
Influencer.
the monkey.
Oh.
Or I was gonna say with the monkey who's like just like swiping like on Tinder, right?
Yeah.
It's like he changes his income to like 10 times what it actually is, and like he asks the kangaroo bartender, like, "Hey, would you marry me?" She's like, "No."
Hell no.
It's because I'm. He's like, "It's because I'm broke, is it?" And she's like, "Yeah, dude, money's an important thing in a relationship."
Or just again, to go back to the bit with the influencer, just the total palpable disconnect between our main character and this, 20-something yuppie trying to make it
He
big
just
on Instagram.
doesn't understand it at all. It works, right? Because later he is seen like talking with like somebody in his age group, and they have their own dumb inside jokes, right, about Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, there's a
and,
Bruce Springsteen reference in this show. What the hell?
Yeah, right. And it's like, but it works, right? Because like in a ways, that is his generation's like weird, like in
pop culture touchstone,
impenetrable, like
Right.
cultural touchstone. It's like, yeah, it works. It works.
It's a really nice surprise.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where they go with all that. They're setting up. Like you said, G. They're setting up a lot of weird, potentially dark things in the future.
Look, I'm just waiting until this walrus fist fights that baboon under the bridge in the last episode.
Yeah, I was gonna. Is this like our substitute for Beastars this season to hold us over for now? I don't know, but we'll see. All right. Final show.
Yep.
You guys asked me to put the Godzilla show that is currently in Netflix hell, I believe, on here. Godzilla Singular Point.
Speaking of Nisi Oisin,
I think you're full of
is this-
shit, dude. When you keep
what?
like saying that this is exactly like DC Oisin.
Oh right,
Like,
you mean in that particular way, rather than the way you think I'm full of shit generally. I needed clarification there.
All right. So let's back up a little bit. I mean, it has the Godzilla name on it. How much of this is actually Godzilla, or what's going on?
That's the interesting thing. So far, very little.
Okay.
Like,
It's a really.
I kind of don't.
Oh, sorry.
What?
Go on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say.
I
think
don't want to
it's-
spoil.
All right.
Dang it.
G, you go first.
I don't want to spoil like too much, but there's a very good reveal at the end of episode 1 that, like, at least to me, I was instantly hooked. The second like they reveal something at the very end of the debut episode, I was like, okay, I need to see like what is going on here. And the reason is I think that this Godzilla anime that's doing what it's doing very strongly, in my opinion, is it's doing a great job of like what I think some of the best Godzilla movies do, which is the build up to the arrival of the monster, right? Like, we as the viewer kind of are like, there's a little bit of like a slow moving horror aspect of it, right? Like, these people who have no clue what's going on are like, they're looking at the readings at the radio station, and they're analyzing the weather patterns, and they don't know what's going on, but something strange is happening to their world, and there's a very fun like creeping tension towards that reveal that I think the anime has done really well so far.
I think it's super interesting the way they're choosing to approach it, and I think that G is absolutely right. They understand that in any sort of, Godzilla-based piece of media, that at least half the battle is making the build-up to Godzilla actually good. And I think, by tying it into the whole, what is it they called? UMAs, unidentified massive animals, or whatever it is. They're tying it very closely to kind of like weird quirky, like modern conspiracy theory stuff, and that seems like an
so like Godzilla is just like another Bigfoot or something.
Right, like sort of an ancient
yeah,
aliens. Sort
like
of
and I
situation.
think that's a really interesting direction to take the show, you know, and I think it does have this. I mean, a little bit like Odd Taxi, you know, it does have this sort of unsettling ambience where, like, we, the audience, know that something big is going down because this is a show about Godzilla, but, like, the characters are just sort of, like, picking through the pieces to try and find it. For what it's worth, I'm mostly joking about the Nishioi Sin stuff, but I think there is a lot of talking. There's a lot of talking.
There's a lot of talking.
And I think sometimes that's good because it gives us, you know, good sketches of the characters, and some of the dialogue is just good, you know, there's just some good, shitty, inane dialogue, but there's so much talking it can be a little bit wearing sometimes, you know, and I think there is a middle ground they could have found here.
I think I can understand that criticism.
Is this his original project, or was it like a novel or something? Or
I think it's original, isn't it?
I think it's original, but
I feel like usually when you get too much talking, it's because it's a novel, but
well, it seems like they are. Again, I'm not familiar with the literature. It does seem like they are quoting something, right? Like they're quoting like either literature or something, because there is that vibe to it. Like the thing I kept saying watching like the first 2 episodes, it's like, okay, like I'm not a super hardcore Godzilla guy, so like a lot of this is probably going over my head. But there is just like the way certain like shots are framed and certain pieces of dialogue are delivered to me feels like, oh, like this was intended for somebody who is like deep into the Godzilla stuff.
It feels very postmodern, and I don't mean that in kind of the obnoxious nudge nudge wink wink way in that it's often used, but it feels very much like a story that's like, okay, you know Godzilla, we know Godzilla, so let's run in circles around the ideas a little bit and see where it takes us.
Also, there's a shitty jet Jaguar being built in somebody's garage, and it fights a shitty Rodan in the second
episode.
Okay,
okay, now you're talking.
That sounds good. I've only seen the first episode, so
now you're talking.
So like it's some like, and here's the thing. I think it actually still works within the context of the show, but like to give some background, the like kind of shitty conspiracy like ancient alien dudes are like led by like this crazy old man whose dream was to, I guess, build a fighting robot, and he builds Jet Jaguar, a mainstay of the Godzilla expanded universe of a sort.
He's fairly iconic of the series.
A cult member of the Godzilla universe.
Yes,
say.
Except it's Jet Jaguar if it was built in somebody's basement. So like, it's walking on these like really shitty stumpy legs, and its hands are like, you know, basically just like industrial car building robots, but painted in Jet Jaguar's color scheme.
It looks like it's made out of paint cans and pipe cleaners and stuff. You know, obviously it's not, but it has that aesthetic.
But it kind of works because the first kaiju that shows up is, well, I'm not sure if it's Rodan or like some Rodan knock. Okay, it is definitely Rodan. But, well, the problem is that there's like...
well, yeah, but you know.
Yeah, so Rodan shows up, but it's like not like, you know...
He's not kaiju-sized Rodan.
Right, he is like maybe slightly large, like a pterodactyl-sized Rodan, maybe like,
right,
you know, the size of a car size.
Big,
Rodan.
but not like skyscraper sized.
Right, so like it almost like perfectly fits that these two have their really like fucking shitty, clumsy fight in the middle of the street, because like, they're both so mundane compared to like their much more grandiose like, you know, film counterparts. It's
all right.
And there's a fun like energy to it, and I'm not saying that like, oh well, clearly Jet Jaguar is the hero who will save us from the kaiju menace, but like it kind of like leans well into what the first episode did of like, these are regular people, right? Like these are not government agents, these are not like, you know, these are not scientists working in top secret labs, like these are regular citizens who maybe just happen to be paying attention to the right signals,
right? And
as a result, like by sheer happenstance, they are the most equipped to deal with, you know, the situation. But that doesn't mean that, you know, they're necessarily good at their jobs.
And I think that, you know, it sort of again plays into the postmodern angle. You know, you've got layers of story here. So like you've got the show, in which obviously all the characters are fictional, but then you have, fake Jet Jaguar versus fake Rodan, for what it's worth, and that's just like another layer of meta narrative on top of what will hopefully eventually be an appearance by real ass Godzilla, but it's just another level of another level that the story is operating on.
Will we get Godzilla?
I mean, the end of that first episode seems fairly definitive.
But what if this anime takes place in a post-Godzilla world, is all I'm saying.
I think that's a safe bet, again, given the end of that first episode. But also, if one character has a long history of being revived by various Deus Ex Machinas, Godzilla's up there.
Yes.
Right. I'd be hard-pressed to think that you'd make a Godzilla series that doesn't have Godzilla at some point, even if it's, like, at the end or something. I don't know, but... All right, well, that's interesting. I mean, is it more of, like a serious type of show? Like...
Well, it's got a light touch.
I would not say it is overly self-serious.
Its characters are, they're not, comical, but they're a little goofy, right?
Yeah, you have your wacky AI sidekick.
Right, like the old man who built the robot has like a lazy eye, and he's 2 feet tall or something. Like,
right.
There's a girl
a little,
who's like, sorry, go ahead.
There's a little bit of anime silliness to it.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks Netflix on that one, I guess.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, we'll see how that goes.
I'm already dealing with people who are like, "Oh, I won't watch Beastars until it's on Netflix." It's like, well. Now we have to deal with this with Godzilla also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we were talking about... Yeah, there's quite a few. What was it? Eden Zero that is technically out. I saw the announcement that's not coming out until fall.
Yeah.
Christ.
On Netflix. Yeah. Well,
man,
we'll look forward
people are going to have to wait 52 weeks plus for Shaman King to drop on Netflix.
Oh, man.
Wait, is that really what they're planning? To drop it all at once it's complete?
It's Netflix, right? They always do that.
No, they if it's really long, they'll drop part of it
You're
first.
You're right.
They'll probably do like a Great Pretender of like first half and like.
But yeah, I mean either way, they still might not drop it until September or something. Well, I'll look forward to Beastar Season 2 competing for Anime of the Year in 2022.
Yeah.
So. All right, that's gonna do it. That's a long one in the books here.
We made it.
There were a lot of shows.
We made it. There's more shows that that were still straggling about. I think most notably,
To Your Eternity.
To Your Eternity has not aired as of us recording, although it will have aired by the time this gets out.
I feel like the Prestige stuff always comes out towards the end of the window.
Yeah, sometimes that works out that way. So we'll get on whatever's left next time. So. Let's wrap it up then. You can check out all of our written first looks for all the shows that we've covered, many of which are not on this list, and many of which are bad, which is why they did not make it on this list. Either bad or boring, or not particularly notable. So, check us out there at theglorioblog.com for all of our written first looks.
I'm still working on putting together a post for the final episode of Wonder Egg Priority. That should be out hopefully before this podcast gets posted.
Or technically the second to last.
Well, no, I mean
this
is the final episode, and then there's a special presentation.
Okay, if we want to call it.
Yes,
we want to call it
that. The final episode for now.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Follow us on Twitter at the GLORIO blog. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher, and of course on YouTube. You can where you can like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, etc., etc. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, and we'll catch everybody next time.